While I was writing my review for Watam, I came across some interesting information behind its creator, Keita Takahashi, or as he's commonly referred to as, remember Katamari Damacy? What a weird game. This guy made it. He must be a total fucking psychopath. I can't believe he made that game. Keita is one of those video game industry enigmas. Like our good friend Okamoto, Keita wanted to become an artist first. He had gone to school to be a sculptor, and his creations were fucking incredible.
I made a table that transformed into robot. It needs 2 people to transform it. Also, I made a flower pot in the shape of a goat. The water should be drained through their boobs.
A revelation happened when Takahashi began to notice how all of the artwork at his college was thrown away shortly after the students had presented it during an exhibition or turned in their work for a grade. He felt that artwork was a commodity and it did not have a lasting impact on the lives of people. Takahashi's own work was a reflection of his art philosophy and was a huge influencer on his game design. Keita Takahashi has come out on the record stating that Katamari was his commentary on mass consumption and the disposable nature of our society. In other words, we create a lot of shit, oftentimes just to throw it away. And the solution he proposes through the medium of Katamari is a simple one. What are you gonna do with all this trash in our society? Roll it up, shoot it into space, and turn it into a shining star. I mean, it's a better plan than our current one, which is doing nothing and hoping for the best. Keita cited 2 games as being somewhat inspirational to the look and feel of Katamari Damacy. One was an obscure game called Cubivore, a game presented in a simple polygonal style that centers around eating, fucking, and evolving. The other was a little game from a young new developer that took the Japanese game industry by storm. Maybe you've heard of him, Fumito Ueda's Ico. Takahashi admired the concept of forming connections through handholding, a concept that would carry over decades later into Watam, and he also thought the couch save points to be rather cool. Side note, Keita and Ueda met shortly after the release of Katamari Damacy, and they've been BFFs ever since. Here they are interviewing each other about Western game development versus Japanese game development. Keita's really getting into it, and by it, I mean his butthole. He's giving it that deep scratch. This is where all his best game ideas come from. Whatever you do, Ueda, don't hold his hand. No matter how much he calls himself Yoda, don't do it.
I don't have any friends in the game industry.
Keita Doodoo Hands Takahashi joined Namco in the early 2000s. The Namco executives didn't quite like Takahashi as he came off as socially awkward and crass during his interview. But one of the interviewers was an artist, and they persuaded an executive to hire him. When he asked the artist why they did him that solid, they simply replied, "You looked very unique, and I felt there was potential to make something fun with you." Takahashi was in charge of forming a crew to help make the prototype of Katamari Damacy, so he turned to the Namco Digital Hollywood Game Lab, which was kind of like a college internship course filled with young students wanting to make their own video games. He hired about 20 students to make all those simple objects that you see in Katamari. Takahashi and his skeleton crew took 6 months and got to work on the prototype of Katamari. The prototype was an instant hit with all the employees at Namco, and he convinced the executives to greenlight the rest of the project, and they went into full development thereafter. Katamari went on to become a minor hit in Japan, but Takahashi and Namco thought that international audiences wouldn't understand the appeal of the game. The game was not going to get localized. That is until he was invited to appear at the experimental gameplay workshop at the Game Developers Conference in 2003. Keita, going in with no expectations, demonstrated his game for the first time to Western developers, and it blew them away. At the end of his conference, he announced that there were no plans for a Western release, and it caused somewhat of an uproar, as one by one developers came up to him and begged him and Namco to reconsider their position. They localized the game and brought it to E3 2004, and the game was released on September 21st, 22nd of 2004 at the small price of $20 US. And I know this because I bought it on that day. Source, me. It's been almost 15 years since Keita had any involvement with the Katamari franchise, with We Love Katamari being his last involvement. As a point of fact, Keita had never intended for the Katamari series to become a series. He envisioned Katamari as being a one-off concept, but after the surprise international success of Katamari Damacy, noticing that the game had touched the hearts of fans worldwide, he returned to the stage for an encore performance and brought us the best game in the Katamari franchise, We Love Katamari. Namco had set their sights on turning Katamari into one of their bigger franchises. Meanwhile, Keita wanted to put Katamari behind him to work on new ideas. Keita, not wanting to continue on, decided to go independent and form his own game studio, Uvula, where he made games such as Noby Noby Boy. Namco, on the other hand, was going to continue the Katamari franchise with or without Keita's involvement, and they proceeded to make 12 subsequent Katamari games. It's a tale as old as time at this point. A young up-and-coming artist comes into the game industry and shakes things up with a brand new concept never before seen, and a big corporate entity runs it into the ground over and over again until it's no longer quirky and special. It becomes a homogenized caricature from what it started out to be, and the magic is gone. I should probably mention that Keita also had a short stint as a designer of playground equipment, really fucking dangerous playground equipment, but for some unknown reason, he couldn't find the funding to realize his true vision.
In the end, it was cancelled for budget reason. Yeah, so stupid.
I should also show you this prototype that he animated from his personal blog. It has nothing to do with his game design, but I need to show you this.
In the end, it was cancelled for budget reason. Yeah, so stupid.
At E3 of 2014, Keita showed Watam to the world for the first time, and oh no, what's he doing?
Hi. I'm Japanese, I guess.
Get him off the stage, he's gonna die! During my research, I came to the conclusion that Keita Takahashi hates two things: people and crowds of people. He shares in problems that a lot of visionaries do. They're typically awkward in a social sense, passive to a fault, and often have trouble explaining their vision to people holding the money bags.
How would you describe Watam? How would you describe it?
I can't.
Let's have to watch it.
Yeah. Can you?
No, I have no idea what kind of game it is.
Visionary developers also tend to experience the problems of being too much of a perfectionist, which causes them to go over budget and time allotted to develop the game. Personally, I feel Watam fell victim to this vicious cycle, as the game was announced back in 2014 and took 5 long years to develop. This game experienced several setbacks during development. For example, the project had to start over from scratch after having been developed entirely in the Unity engine, which began to show its age and limitations for the scope that Keita had for Watam's living populace mechanics. The differences between the Unity version of Watam and the Unreal 4 one, the final one we got, are almost night and day. For one, there are several characters that appear in the pre-release trailer that don't appear in the final game, like these donuts, this record player. Also, the ability to control a cloud and grow flowers is absent entirely. But it does seem like the world was much smaller in scale, as most of the action is relegated to just one square of land that was slowly expanded upon, versus a series of interconnected seasonal worlds that we got in the final game. During the transition to the Unreal 4, Sony pulled out of publishing Watam for unknown reasons. Takahashi felt they didn't understand where the project was going, but he did not blame them and held no ill will towards Sony in the end, or Namco after all these years. Somehow he worked out a deal to get the prince back in Watam. Okay, so the inspiration for Watam came about one day while Takahashi was playing with blocks with his son. If you know anything about Keita, many of his creations are often inspired by household objects. Just give it a cute face and there you go, you have a character. I know people love to pin the label of weird Japanese guy upon Keita Takahashi, but quite honestly, he's not as weird as people make him out to be. Seriously, I just hate it when people take Takahashi's games for face value and write them off as, oh, this is so weird and Japanese. What kind of drugs does he do? I would like to take the drugs that he takes. Were you never exposed to children's shows like Sesame Street? Conceptually speaking, the idea of a giant talking bird is pretty fucking weird when you think about it, bro. Just settle down and enjoy the ride. Like most of his games, Watam begins with a picture book recounting of a galactic genocide event where a tiny protagonist has to rise to the occasion and put shit back together using the most idiosyncratic means available to him. You reconnect the post-apocalyptic Earth through the power of holding hands. You see, there's the Ico connection. I don't want to risk over-explaining all the moving pieces to Watam, as there's too many to describe, and most are playable. I guess the best way I can put it is that you're the mayor of Lonely Town, and you're desperate to make friends. Any friends. It doesn't matter. You'll befriend that rock over there. Doesn't matter. I just love the company. The gameplay never takes a breath, as you'll be moving from one wacky objective to the next. Keita's game design is often a reflection of his sense of humor, which could best be described as scatological. Emphasis on the scat. It has somewhat of a sandbox quality to it, as the game lays out basic objectives for you, but doesn't always have one means to achieve the goals. You eat something, you poop it out, join hands and spin around until the next giant sentient ship rips a hole in the space-time continuum and drops off more homies for you to befriend. The more friends you make, the bigger the scope of the world becomes for you, and eventually you'll be traveling to different islands, which are designated by seasons. Citizens of various islands will speak different languages and offer unique abilities, which will help you towards the ultimate goal of reconnecting the UCA to the chiral network. Music and sound design are important to the essence of a Takahashi game. From relaxing piano scores that might give you flashbacks of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood to full-on swing bands with an over-enthusiastic screaming Japanese man, his soundtracks are made to cultivate smiles. It's also a family affair, as his wife was the lead composer of Watam. I should warn you though, do not play this game in 5.1 surround sound. It was creeping me out in my living room, just hearing the sound of laughing children behind you at all times. Keita wanted to make Watam on his own terms. He wanted a game that emulated the feeling of playing games as a child, which is often a sporadic affair, free of rules or restrictions. In Watam, there are almost no boundaries to the gameplay. That is, unless you count technical limitations of the system you're playing it on. Now, I'm not sure if this holds true for the PC version, but the PS4 could not handle the amount of characters and chaos that you may get up to when shooting for some of the trophies within Watam. I was going for the humble objective of 101 poops, which required me to play as this tree and inhale citizens in a Kirby-like fashion to then transform their bodies into snacks and then switch over to this mouth man and then eat the snacks and turn them into living poops, as is typical in games of this nature. So I was continuing on with this poop grind, and the game could only seem to handle about 35 consecutive poops before the engine shat the bed and froze. And I know this just wasn't a one-off glitch, as the same problem happened to my friend Kirk Almighty. Go subscribe to him on YouTube. Regardless, Watam is a playable game from start to finish, and it won't take you all that long, about 3 hours. There's very minor post-game content, and a lot of it revolves around doing tiny little sub-objectives until you just run out of stuff to do. Really, for 5 years of development time, it's not the most impressive product he's ever put out, but I still maintain it was a worthwhile experiment. I just hope that with the inclusion of the Prince and Noby Noby Boy, that he's not aiming to end on some grand trilogy, and that he continues on trying to create more abstract games. Because despite its flaws, Watam is still more interesting than the grand majority of games to be released in this last decade. And I would argue that Takahashi still has more great ideas within him. Just give him some time and he'll dig one out.
Beautiful stars.